Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be exploring traditional native foods and how they can act as food as medicine. We will examine a historical perspective and learn how to help restore these deeply rooted cultural practices to provide better care for American Indian and Alaska Native AIAN patients. The objectives for today's session are to understand the role of nutrition in disease prevention and management and how food can be used as a therapeutic tool. Recognize the historical and cultural significance of food in Native American communities, including traditional food practices and their health benefits. Describe traditional diets and food practices of Native American communities and learn how these can be integrated into modern healthcare. American Indian and Alaska Native communities face significant health disparities compared to the general U.S. population. These disparities are deeply rooted in historical, social, and environmental factors. Chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, and obesity disproportionately affect these populations. For example, AIAN adults are 2.3 times more likely to have diabetes than non-Hispanic whites, and rates of obesity and heart disease are also alarmingly high. Native American food practices are deeply rooted in the diverse cultures and environments of various tribes across North America. Historically, these practices were shaped by the natural resources available in their regions, leading to a rich variety of diets and culinary traditions. With hunting, there is focus on utilizing the entire animal and respecting the natural environment, often incorporating techniques like drying, smoking, and storing food for long-term use. The three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, have been a staple crop combination across many tribes depending on their region and climate. Key Native American food practices include agriculture. Many tribes, such as the Iroquois and the Pueblo, practiced agriculture, growing crops like corn or maize, beans, and squash, often referred to as the Three Sisters. These crops were staples in their diet and were often grown together in a symbiotic relationship. Hunting and fishing. Tribes like the Plains Indians relied heavily on hunting, particularly bison, which provided not only food but also materials for clothing, shelter, and tools. Coastal tribes, such as the Pacific Northwest tribes, depended on fishing, with salmon being a crucial part of their diet. Gathering. Foraging for wild plants, nuts, berries, and roots was common among many tribes. The Apache, for example, gathered mesquite beans, acorns, and various wild fruits. Food preservation. Techniques like drying, smoking, and fermenting were used to preserve food for times when resources were scarce. Pemmican, a mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries, was a vital food source for many tribes, especially during long journeys or harsh winters. Cultural significance. Food was not just sustenance, but also played a significant role in ceremonies and social gatherings. Feasts and communal meals were common, and certain foods were often associated with specific rituals and traditions. Respect for the land. Native Americans held a deep spiritual connection to the land and considered food sources to be sacred, often performing rituals before hunting or harvesting. Traditional diets play a critical role in addressing chronic diseases that disproportionately affect American Indian and Alaska Native communities. These diets are not just about nutrition, they are deeply tied to cultural identity, environmental sustainability, and community well-being. Let me break this down further. First, traditional foods are incredibly nutrient-dense, making them powerful tools for managing and preventing chronic diseases. For example, diabetes management. Traditional diets are typically low in refined sugars and high in fiber, which helps regulate blood sugar levels. Foods like wild rice, berries, and squash are staples in many native diets and have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity. Heart disease prevention. Traditional foods like salmon, bison, and walnuts are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, lean proteins, and healthy fats, which support cardiovascular health. These foods reduce cholesterol levels and lower the risk of heart attacks and strokes. Obesity reduction. Traditional diets emphasize whole, unprocessed foods that are naturally lower in calories and higher in nutrients. This contrasts sharply with the processed and fast foods often found in food deserts, which contribute to obesity rates. Geriatric care. Fish high in calcium contributes to bone health, berries high in antioxidants assist with brain function. Second, food sovereignty is a cornerstone of health equity for Native communities. Food sovereignty means ensuring that communities have control over their own food systems, what they grow, hunt, fish, and harvest. This concept is vital because it empowers tribes to reclaim their ancestral practices and reduce dependence on external food systems that often fail them. For instance, many tribal communities are revitalizing buffalo herds, not only as a source of lean protein, but also to restore cultural pride and self-sufficiency. Others are reviving traditional farming practices, such as growing heirloom crops like blue corn or Three Sisters gardens, corn, beans, and squash, which provide balanced nutrition and honor cultural traditions. Let's look at some specific traditional foods and their health benefits. Wild rice is high in fiber and protein. Berries are rich in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory properties. Salmon provides omega-3 fatty acids for heart health. Bison is high protein and low in fat. It is also nutrient-rich with vitamin B, iron, selenium, and zinc. Squash contains vitamins A and C, supporting immune function. Edible wild plants, such as camas, wild onions, and fiddleheads, offer medicinal properties and nutrient density. These foods are not only nutritious, but also culturally significant. Food holds profound historical significance in AIAN communities, acting as a cornerstone of culture, identity, and connection to the land. Traditional food practices were often designed to provide optimal nutrition through diverse, locally sourced ingredients, including significant health benefits when consumed in a balanced manner. Key points about Native American food traditions. Deep cultural connection. Food is more than sustenance. It is intertwined with spirituality, stories, ceremonies, and rituals passed down through generations, reflecting the relationship between people and their environment. Profound reference for elders. Native American cultures traditionally hold elders in very high regard, seeing them as vital pillars of wisdom, guidance, and cultural continuity. Involving elders in passing down food traditions preserves cultural knowledge while benefiting their health. This focus ensures older adults remain connected to their heritage while receiving proper nutrition. Diverse food sources based on region. Depending on geography, Native communities relied on a variety of foods including wild game, fish, berries, nuts, seeds, grains like corn, squash, beans, and various edible plants, often utilizing techniques like farming, hunting, fishing, and gathering. Nutritional benefits. Traditional Native diets were often considered nutritionally balanced, featuring high fiber content from plants, lean protein from meat and fish, and essential vitamins and minerals from diverse food sources. Native communities are actively working to regain control over their food systems by promoting local food production, traditional farming techniques, and education about indigenous foodways. Many tribes are establishing community gardens to increase access to fresh, culturally relevant food. Studies have shown that integrating traditional foods back into the diet can contribute to improved health outcomes by reducing the risk of chronic diseases like diabetes and obesity. Government food distribution. These programs began in the mid-20th century, especially after the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 and through the Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations, which officially started in 1977. Intended as a form of welfare and replacement for traditional food sources lost due to displacement, land loss, or overhunting. Commodities often included refined flour, lard, canned meats like Spam, processed cheese, powdered milk, and sugary products. These foods were shelf-stable and cheap to distribute, high in fat, salt, and sugar, low in vitamins, fiber, and overall nutritional value. The shift from traditional diets, rich in game meats, fish, nuts, seeds, fruits, and vegetables, to processed commodity foods led to high rates of diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and other nutritional deficiencies and chronic health issues. The loss of traditional foods disrupted food sovereignty, the right to grow, hunt, gather, and eat traditional and culturally appropriate foods. Cooking with commodity foods became normalized, with dishes like fry bread emerging as survival foods that later became cultural symbols, despite their unhealthy origins. Reliance on government-provided food deepened economic dependency and eroded traditional knowledge of land-based subsistence. Despite the immense benefits of traditional foods, accessing them is not always easy for American Indian and Alaska Native communities. There are several significant challenges that make it difficult for families to incorporate these foods into their daily lives. Let's explore these barriers in detail. Geographic isolation limits availability. Many American Indian and Alaska Native communities are located in remote areas far from grocery stores or markets that might carry fresh, healthy foods. For example, Some tribal lands in Alaska or the Southwest are accessible only by plane or boat, making it incredibly challenging to transport perishable goods like fresh produce or wild game. Even when traditional foods are available locally, they may be seasonal or require significant effort to harvest, hunt, or gather. This geographic isolation often forces families to rely on convenience stores or gas stations, where options are typically limited to processed, nutrient-poor foods. Economic barriers make it hard for families to afford these foods. Poverty rates in AIAN communities are among the highest in the United States, with many families struggling to afford even basic necessities. While traditional foods like wild rice, salmon, or bison are nutrient-dense and culturally significant, they can sometimes be more expensive than processed alternatives due to factors like labor-intensive harvesting or limited supply. Additionally, the cost of equipment needed for hunting, fishing, or gardening, such as fishing nets, rifles, or farming tools, can be prohibitive for low-income households. This economic strain creates a cycle where healthier traditional foods remain out of reach for many families. Environmental changes, like climate change, disrupt ecosystems and traditional food sources. Climate change poses a growing threat to the ecosystems that support traditional food systems. Rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns, and habitat destruction are disrupting the availability of key foods. For instance, in Alaska, warming waters and melting glaciers are threatening salmon populations, which are a staple food for many tribes. Declining salmon runs not only impact nutrition, but also weaken cultural practices tied to fishing and ceremonies. In the Southwest, prolonged droughts have reduced the availability of wild plants like mesquite pods and prickly pear cactus, which are important sources of nutrition. Wild rice beds in the Great Lakes region are shrinking due to water pollution and invasive species, making it harder for tribes like the Ojibwe to harvest the sacred grain. These environmental changes are not just ecological issues, they are deeply personal, affecting the health, culture, and survival of tribal communities. Loss of traditional knowledge weakens connections to ancestral practices. Over generations, the forced relocation of tribes, boarding school policies, and urbanization have led to a loss of traditional knowledge about food practices. Elders, who are often the keepers of this wisdom, are passing away, and younger generations may not have the same level of exposure to skills like hunting, fishing, or seed saving. For example, in some communities, fewer people know how to identify edible wild plants or prepare traditional recipes. The art of preserving foods, such as smoking salmon or drying berries, is at risk of being forgotten. This loss of knowledge weakens the connection between individuals and their ancestral food systems, making it harder to reclaim these practices. To illustrate these challenges, consider the impact of declining salmon populations on tribes in the Pacific Northwest. Salmon is more than just a food source. It's a cornerstone of cultural identity and spiritual practice. However, climate change, overfishing, and dam construction have drastically reduced salmon runs. This has forced many tribes to seek alternative protein sources, often turning to less nutritious processed meats. The loss of salmon doesn't just affect physical health, it also erodes cultural traditions and community cohesion. Addressing these barriers is essential for improving health outcomes. These challenges highlight the urgent need to address barriers to accessing traditional foods. By doing so, we can improve health outcomes while honoring cultural heritage. Initiatives like restoring buffalo herds, revitalizing tribal gardens, and supporting Indigenous-led conservation programs are critical steps forward. Collaboration between tribal leaders, healthcare providers, policymakers, and researchers is essential to create sustainable solutions that empower AIAN communities to reclaim their food sovereignty. Integrating these traditional practices into modern healthcare can offer numerous benefits. Here are some ways that can be accomplished. Promote access to traditional foods. The Traditional Foods Project, TFP, work to restore access to local traditional foods. Offer nutritional counseling. Healthcare providers can incorporate traditional foods into dietary plans, respecting cultural preferences and promoting balanced nutrition. Encourage physical activity. The TFP can help promote physical activity as part of a healthy lifestyle. Encourage community-based methods and programs. Initiatives to grow and harvest traditional foods can support food sovereignty and improve access to healthy options. Provide education to increase awareness. Educating patients about the health benefits of traditional diets can encourage healthier eating habits. Healthcare professionals should work to build trust and understanding with Native American patients by acknowledging and respecting their food traditions. General dietary guidelines can be adapted to include culturally specific foods, making them more relevant and effective. Embracing these traditional practices not only honors cultural heritage, but also promotes holistic health and well-being. To summarize, Native American food practices are deeply rooted in culture and environment. Traditional diets rich in nutrient-dense foods prevent and manage chronic diseases. Barriers to accessing traditional foods must be addressed through policy changes and community efforts. Healthcare providers play a vital role in respecting and promoting these practices. Together, we can honor this wisdom and improve health outcomes. Here's how you can take action. Advocate for policies supporting Indigenous food sovereignty. Collaborate with Native communities to preserve traditional knowledge. Incorporate these principles into your practice or research. Learn more through these resources. Intertribal Buffalo Council, restoring buffalo herds on tribal lands. Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, promoting seed sovereignty and traditional farming. Traditional Food Guide for Alaska Native People, supporting nutrition and healing through traditional foods. First Nations Development Institute, supporting Native-led food initiatives. Your involvement can make a difference. Here are our references. Thank you for listening to this presentation.